Okay, let's dive right in today. We're exploring the surprisingly complex legal world that governs one of our oldest drinks, wine. If you thought it was all just about grapes and barrels, well, think again.
We're really getting into the weeds with the rules set by the International Organization of Vine and Wine, the OIV. And this isn't just some industry group suggesting things.
No, it's much more than that.
It's the global technical and legal reference. It forms the backbone for national laws, certainly within the EU, and influences regulations worldwide.
So basically, the OIV code is what ensures, say, a bottle of Chilean Merlot has met the same fundamental legal standards as one made in, I don't know, Italy or Australia. It's
Good.
about global consistency.
Exactly that. It's this massive integrated system of rules. You've got the International Code of Enological Practices, that's the big one, detailing what you can and can't do in the winery.
Okay.
But it also includes things like the Compendium of International Methods of Wine and Must Analysis. So not just the rules, but exactly how you have to test things in the lab.
Right. So our mission today is to sort of unpack this OIV code. We'll look at some really specific definitions. You might be surprised. Then we'll get into the approved toolkit winemakers have for, let's say, adjustments.
A very regulated toolkit.
A highly regulated toolkit, yes. And then, crucially, we'll link all this technical stuff back to what's happening now, specifically how the UK government recently framed these exact kinds of rules as, quote, barriers to growth.
Okay, let's start at square one then. Part one of the code. Product definitions. Even grape must has a specific definition.
Just grape juice, right.
Well, yes, the liquid from fresh grapes. But the code specifies it can be obtained spontaneously, juice running off or by physical means crushing, draining, pressing. It's precise.
And then there's preserved grape must. That sounds like something different.
It is. It's grape must, where they've deliberately stopped fermentation from happening. So non-alcoholic grape juice, essentially.
How do they stop it?
The code mentions adding sulfur dioxide, that's sulfiting, or sometimes adding CO2, so carbonation. But importantly, because you can never perfectly halt all yeast activity instantly, the code allows for a tiny bit of natural alcohol, what they call endogenous ethanol.
Okay, like trace amounts.
Exactly. But it's strictly capped, maximum 1% alcohol by volume, any more. And it's not legally preserved grape must.
Right, this is where it starts feeling less like farming and more like, I don't know, chemical specification. The way the OIV defines still wine based on sugar. It's not just dry means not sweet.
No, it's surprisingly technical. They measure the total glucose and fructose. For a wine to be legally labeled dry, it needs a maximum of 4 grams per liter of this sugar.
Okay, 4 grams. Seems simple.
But there's a catch. That limit can actually go up to 9 grams per liter.
Oh, why the exception?
It can only go up to 9 GL if the wine's total acidity measured as grams per liter of tartaric acid isn't more than 2 grams per liter lower than the sugar level.
Wait, hang on. So if you have, say, 8 grams of sugar, you need at least 6 grams of acidity for it still to be called dry.
Precisely. It's basically building balance into the legal definition. They're regulating the chemistry to ensure a certain sensory outcome, or at least preventing overly sweet wines without enough acidity from being labeled dry.
That's fascinating. It's regulating taste through chemistry. So what about the other categories?
It gets simpler after that, actually. Semi-sweet covers the range above dry, up to a maximum of 45 grams per liter of sugar.
And sweet?
Sweet wine is defined simply as having a minimum sugar content of 45 grams per liter. No upper limit specified there.
I also noticed the code defines some quite niche or modern styles. It lists ice wine or Eiswein, and it also tackles what many people call orange wine.
Right. The OIV calls it white wine with maceration. And it's not just a loose description. There are 4 specific legal requirements it must meet.
Okay, what are they?
First, obviously only milk grades. Second, the juice must macerate soak in contact with the grape pomace. That's the skins and seeds primarily.
For how long?
Minimum 1 month. That's quite specific. And finally, the resulting wine must have that characteristic orange-amber color and, importantly, a tannic taste from the skin contact.
So the OIV isn't stuck in the past. It's actually incorporating and defining these newer styles.
Absolutely. It has to keep international trade clear. It even defines wines with modified alcohol content, dealcoholized or partially dealcoholized wines.
And it doesn't stop there. Even the fizz is regulated, right? The amount of CO2.
Oh, definitely. Still wine, legally, must have less than 4 grams per liter of dissolved CO2 when measured at 20 degrees Celsius.
And if it has a bit more.
If it's between 3 and 5 grams per liter of CO2 at 20 degrees C, It falls into the semi-sparkling category.
Improper bubbly.
For sparkling wines, the sugar levels we talked about become key for classification again, often with even tighter limits. Take Brut, probably the most common style. Yeah. Legally, it must have 12 grams per liter of sugar at most. Though, interestingly, they allow a small tolerance of plus 3 grams per liter, likely for technical variability in production.
And the really sweet sparkling wines.
If it has more than 50 grams per liter of sugar, it's legally defined as sweet or dew. These aren't just taste descriptors. They're legal boundaries impacting labels, exports, everything.
Okay, so defining the wine itself is incredibly detailed. But part 2 of the code, enological treatments and practices, that seems like where the real complexity lies. This is the winemaker's toolkit you mentioned.
It really is. And it reads less like tradition and more like industrial chemistry sometimes. Take adjusting acidity. Winemakers might need to add acid, especially in hot climates, using tartaric, lactic, or malic acid. That's chemical acidification.
Okay.
Or in cool climates, they might need to reduce acidity using things like potassium or calcium salts. That's chemical deacidification.
Makes sense.
But here's the key rule. Those two operations, adding acid and removing acid chemically, are mutually exclusive on the same product. You can do one or the other, but not both.
So you can't just like overshoot adding acid and then try to chemically dial it back.
Exactly. It prevents excessive manipulation. You have to choose your path.
Is there an overall limit on how much you can adjust the acidity?
Yes, a very specific one. The total net increase in acidity, whether you do it to the grape, must before fermentation, or the finished wine, cannot exceed 54 milliequivalents per liter.
Which means?
In more practical terms, that translates to about 4 grams per liter if you express it as tartaric acid. It ensures you're correcting, not fundamentally changing the wine's core nature derived from the grapes and region.
Now, I read about an old practice called plastering. Sounds odd. What was it, and is it allowed?
Plastering. It's treating the must or wine with calcium sulfate, basically gypsum, like in wall plaster. It was traditionally used, particularly in some warmer regions, to help stabilize color and lower the pH quite dramatically.
So is it okay now?
No, not for regular wine. The OIV code explicitly states it is not accepted for wines in the strict sense, stricto sensu. It's seen as altering the wine's chemistry too much.
Any exceptions?
Only for certain traditional liqueur wines, where it's historically documented as part of that specific style's production method. But for your standard table wines, absolutely forbidden.
Okay, so moving beyond basic chemistry additions and subtractions, the code gets into some pretty high-tech stuff too, right? Physical processes.
Oh yes. Membrane techniques are well covered. Things like reverse osmosis.
Like for purifying water?
Similar technology, yes.
Mm-hmm.
In winemaking, it's mainly used to gently remove water from grape must to concentrate the sugars and flavors useful in wet vintages.
Can you just concentrate as much as you want?
No, there are strict limits again. You can't reduce the must's volume by more than 20% using these techniques. And the resulting increase in potential alcohol can't be more than 2% ABV. Again, it's about correction, not wholesale transformation.
And then there's electromembrane treatment or electrodialysis. That sounds even more complex. What's that used for?
Right, it sounds like something out of a lab. But it's a physical method for stabilizing wine. It uses an electric field and special membranes to selectively pull out ions, specifically potassium and tartrate ions.
Why pull those out?
Because they can combine and precipitate out of the wine later as tartrate crystals, which consumers often mistake for glass shards. Electrodialysis is a way to achieve tartrate stability without having to chill the wine way down, which is the traditional energy-intensive method.
I see. So it's more modern, efficient way to prevent those crystals.
Essentially, yes. And a related technique, using bipolar membranes, can actually be used to increase acidity by manipulating ions, offering another tool besides just adding acid directly.
Wow. Okay, what about high pressure? I saw that mentioned too. Using extreme pressure on wine.
Yeah, that one surprised me too when I first saw it. We're talking about discontinuous or continuous processes using pressures above 150 megapascals or 1500 bar. That's immense pressure.
Why on earth would you do that to wine?
The primary goal is microbial reduction. High pressure can effectively kill off spoilage yeasts and bacteria.
So it's like a non-thermal pasteurization.
Kind of, yeah. And the important consequence is if you can reduce the microbial load effectively using pressure, you might be able to use less sulfur dioxide, the traditional preservative. So it's seen as a way to potentially lower chemical inputs using physical means.
Okay, let's shift to the actual things added to wine, fining agents, stabilizers. What are some surprising permitted additives in this official toolkit?
Well, there are hundreds listed, but some stand out. For managing oxidation, you find glutathione listed.
What's that?
It's an antioxidant naturally present in grapes, but you can add more to help protect the delicate aromatic compounds, especially in white and rosé wines, preserving that fresh fruit character.
Is there a limit?
Oh yes, very specific. Maximum use level is just 20 milligrams per liter. Tiny amounts, showing incredible precision in the regulations.
What about removing things you don't want, like heavy metals?
Absolutely crucial for safety. The code approves the use of chiadocin.
Titosin. Sounds familiar.
It's derived from chitin, often from fungal sources for wine use. Its job is specifically to bind with and help remove heavy metals like iron, lead, copper. It can also help reduce levels of potential contaminants like ochratoxin A, a mycotoxin.
So it's a safety measure, essentially.
Definitely. And there are other things like PVI, PVP, copolymers, synthetic polymers, also used specifically for reducing copper and iron content. The code is very focused on ensuring purity and safety.
And just as we saw with plastering, are there things explicitly banned that might have been used previously?
Yes. A key one is diethyl dicarbonate, often known as DEPC. It was sometimes used in the past for microbial stabilization, especially at bottling.
And now?
It's explicitly listed in the OIV code as not accepted, reflecting modern safety standards and toxicological understanding. The code evolves.
Okay, one last detail before we get to the policy side. Even aging in wood is codified.
If you're using traditional wooden barrels for fermentation or aging, the OIV defines a small capacity container, think barriques, as having a maximum volume of 600 liters.
And what about oak chips? That's become common.
Yes, the use of pieces of oak wood, that's the official term, is also a fully defined and accepted enological practice. So from the barrel size down to using chips or staves, it's all accounted for in the rules.
This level of detail is just incredible, specifying maximum acidity adjustments, permitted antioxidants down to milligrams per liter, barrel sizes. Which brings us perfectly to the policy discussion. Part 3. How did these incredibly detailed global standards fit into today's political landscape?
Right, because understanding the detail helps understand the debate. And before the UK context, it's worth touching quickly on the OIV's Good Practices Guide, especially for bulk wine transport.
Why is that so important?
Think about it. Huge volumes of wine cross oceans in massive tanks, often stainless steel tank containers. Maintaining quality and preventing contamination during that journey is critical for international trade.
So what do the rules say? What kind of tanks?
The tanks and all the associated equipment like hoses and pipes must be made of materials that are inert to wine. Typically that means polished stainless steel, usually ASI 304 or 316 grade.
And cleanliness.
The standard is acceptable cleanliness, which sounds vague, but it means the tank must be completely free from any taint, any residues from solvents or cleaning agents, any debris, and absolutely no traces of previous cargoes.
What if the tank previously carried something else?
Big restriction here. If a tank container has carried any non-foodstuff cargo previously, it is explicitly forbidden from being used to transport wine afterwards, period. Protects against contamination.
Makes sense. Is the cleaning process itself standardized?
Yes, there's a required procedure, pre-cleaning, then a proper wash with detergent, thorough rinsing, then sanitizing usually with steam, very hot water, or an approved chemical sanitizer, followed by a final rinse and complete draining. It's all designed to prevent any microbial or chemical contamination.
Okay, so we have this incredibly detailed, globally recognized framework from the OIV covering everything from grape must to tank cleaning, designed for quality and trade. The UK, after leaving the EU, basically copied all the EU wine law, which is heavily based on the OIV rules, into its own domestic law.
That's right.
But now the UK government is looking at changing those rules. What's their stated reason?
Well, the official line from DEFRA, the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, and echoed by parts of the UK wine industry, is that these existing complex regulations are acting as barriers to growth and competitiveness.
Barriers? How?
They argue that the current rules, because they're so detailed and perhaps slow to change, are preventing UK producers and consumers from benefiting from what they call the latest innovation.
Okay, but that raises a really interesting point, doesn't it? Given the OIV code already allows highly technical processes like reverse osmosis for concentration, electrodialysis for stabilization, even high-pressure treatment, what specific innovations are being held back?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are they talking about wanting to use fining agents not on the OIV's approved list? Or maybe wanting looser limits on sugar enrichment than the OIV allows? Or perhaps different rules around acidification? or deacidification.
Or maybe even wanting to revisit things the OIV currently forbids, like certain stabilization methods deemed unsafe or overly manipulative elsewhere.
It's not entirely clear from the public statements exactly what specific rules are seen as the primary barriers, but the core tension is there: the desire for domestic flexibility versus adherence to established international standards.
So let's wrap this up. We've seen that the global wine world operates under this incredibly rigorous, detailed set of rules from the OIV.
Mm.
It dictates everything from how you define dry wine using algebra to the specific antioxidants you can add, down to the type of steel used in transport tanks.
And the purpose of that OIV code is clear: ensure a baseline of quality, ensure safety, provide transparency for consumers, and perhaps most importantly, facilitate smooth international trade by having everyone play by the same fundamental rules. But as the recent UK consultation highlights, there's a counter-argument emerging that maybe these comprehensive, globally focused rules, while good for big international players, might be too restrictive for smaller, domestic industries wanting to experiment or perhaps compete on cost using different techniques.
So the big question moving forward, not just for the UK, but potentially other regions too, is how do you strike that balance? How much do you prioritize global standardization and agreed quality benchmarks versus enabling domestic innovation and competitiveness? Can you really have the best of both worlds?
And that leads us perfectly to the final thought we want to leave you, the listener, with, drawing directly from what we've discussed. Given just how specific and frankly technologically advanced the OIV code already is, allowing things like high-pressure sanitation and listing precise limits for additives like glutathione down to 20 parts per million, what kind of latest innovation could the UK wine industry be aiming for?
Yeah, what's missing from that already extensive list of hundreds of accepted practices? Is the push really about unlocking genuine beneficial innovation that the rest of the world hasn't caught up with yet? Or is it perhaps more about seeking deregulation, wanting fewer restrictions, potentially lower costs, even if it means diverging from globally agreed standards?
Something to ponder, perhaps.
Definitely something to mull over next time you're enjoying a glass of wine, a product defined and regulated in ways you might never have imagined. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.